My God, a year into this. Oh, you guys are
And
in the shit right now. Woo!
yeah, yes, that's how it feels every day. But
It
hey,
does.
here's to trying.
Let me say this. Like, God forbid there was an ever an entrepreneurial venture that didn't start with, we could do this. How hard could this possibly be? I don't think anyone would start anything if they knew how hard it was going to be to actually do the thing. Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
so
Really.
I mean, I think that, right, every restaurant opens in the space of a formerly closed restaurant. you know? Um,
We did
uh,
not,
it's
unfortunately,
a
or
oh, I
fortunately.
know. Oh, I am aware.
Yeah.
There's much to discuss. So here we'll just kind of start generally. I think the context is useful for the audience. So if you guys could take 5 minutes, where you just kind of briefly share, how you met and the path that led you to becoming restaurateurs.
Mhm.
Sure. Well, so my background's a very unorthodox one, to say the least. I grew up here in Southern California, in Orange County, more specifically. Spent the weekends with my family, traveling, venturing to Newport Beach on the weekends, as many do. Riding bikes, going for walks, learning to surf, all of the above. And my family made the move here fully when I was beginning high school. So it was a transitionary period that was very interesting. I already loved the place. I didn't know much about the people. And I spent the next 4 years exploring the people, immersing myself in the culture of coastal Orange County. And it coincided with the time where I was kite surfing competitively. So I was traveling quite a bit while I was in school, competing at various locations and interesting and beautiful destinations around the world, and getting ready to determine what my next phase of life would be. I was entrepreneurial ever since I can remember. And my first entrepreneurial path, in a sense, was when I worked with a number of brands who were sponsoring me for kite surfing. And some of those brands were GoPro and Maui Gym sunglasses, and just to name a couple. And I fell in love with what the meaning of a brand is, and how that brand becomes recognized, loved, and becomes something that's part of everyday culture. And I think that being in that intersection of sports and marketing um, led me to feel a desire to build something of my own. Um, Long story short, there was a group of entrepreneurs. There was an article on Forbes, actually, probably over a decade now, that it was titled "Kite Surfing is the New Golf in Tech," or something of the sort. And when I was traveling, I got the opportunity to meet several really, really inspiring individuals, people that I looked up to, seen on the news, but had never interacted with in person. And this is me as a mid teenager. So one day had the opportunity to meet someone who I looked up to quite a bit. He was a founder of several businesses, but one of them was a technology company that I was very fascinated by. And I had asked him for an internship on the beach. We had just finished a beautiful session in San Francisco under the Golden Gate Bridge, and the bottom of his kite surfboard had the name of his tech firm. So that's what led me to initiate a conversation with him. And he looked at me and said, "An internship would be a waste of your time. You'll learn nothing. You'll make copies. How about you try to start something and actually have a meaningful experience?" And that was what planted the seed for me to found my first technology company, which was back in 2014. Um, and ever since then, I considered founding a company to be the most exhilarating adrenaline rush one can imagine, in all the amazing ways and in all the most frustrating ways in the world, and in the most humbling ways as well. And fast forward, I founded my second tech company in 2016, right before graduating high school and moving to Los Angeles for the next 4 years to study at USC. built that company over the next, I'm still doing that every day. That's still where I am Monday through Friday. But through that business, and working with, some incredible individuals, I met Kami. And it was a mutual friend who had just moved to California to join the company. And we got to become very close. And he was from Miami, but I think that's where I'll let you carry the story of your background and how our paths crossed.
Yes. So I'm originally born in Italy, just outside of Milan, a smaller town called Monza. But my family moved to the U.S. when I was just entering middle school, so I was around 11. And we kind of lived all over. We moved around a few times, so I've gotten to experience some of the Midwest when I was younger. Then we moved to Southern Florida and Miami. And then I actually ended up going to college in Boston, so I had kind of seen a few different areas of the U.S. with its own very distinctive culture. And then by the time I had met Dave, through that mutual friend connection, I'd only been to California twice in my life, so I wouldn't say I was very familiar with the area at all. But anyways, so this love relationship started happening, and 8 months later, I had moved to Orange County myself. So that's kind of where we connected and we coincided. We're actually getting married in November. So
congratulations. And
Thank
so
you.
let me see if I can continue the story for you. So things are going well, right? The agency's making all of this money, your companies are doing very well, the relationship's going well, and you're like, we need to figure out a way to blow a ton of cash to create some tax breaks. And I really want to stress test this relationship before we actually tie the knot. We should open a restaurant together.
Together, yes, exactly.
Yes. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, it was a little bit of like that foolish dreaming that you talked about in the beginning, where it's like, how hard could this really be? And why can't we do this? And honestly, it's been the most humbling and thrilling experience, like all the emotions together combined every day. It's like every day when I talk about my day, I feel like I've lived 3 different days, but I'm merging them into one because there's just so much going on constantly. And, as like a small business and as the, 2 owners, founders, and this is my primary job that I do from morning to night, I just feel like there's always so many hats that you're wearing throughout the day. And you're probably having like 3 situations going on at once. And, you're guest facing 1 second and then you're back in the kitchen, something else is going on. And, there's somebody on the phone that needs something else from you.
But you guys have a really interesting background. And so like, it's obviously like until you've done it. I mean, like, look, I ran great places before I opened my first. And I knew that by running it, I knew exactly what to expect when I became an owner. And yet somehow I didn't. So like even being like deeply steeped in it, like the chasm between managing someone else's business and owning and operating your own is just massive, full stop. But you guys are industry adjacent. I mean, Dave, I look at you and I see branding and marketing and positioning and awareness. And Kami, I look at you and I see, supply chain and distribution and culture and all of these things. So it seems like the individual elements are there. So I would ask, expectation, right, the day before you opened versus reality now that we're almost a year into this. And it's all entrepreneurship is strategic guessing, right? And God willing, we just get better at guessing over time. What were the guesses you initially made that turned out to be true and right and you've doubled down on? And then where were the miscalculations? from what you thought it was going to be relative to what it is?
So that's interesting that you mentioned that, Josh, because it was about a year just over a year, about a year and a half from when we decided to pull the trigger on this and officially sign a lease to when we opened our doors. And part of that was because our space is a first generation space for restaurants. So we were, whereas we thought we were going to open this restaurant, our first chapter of this journey began in construction and learning about constructing a restaurant and building a restaurant space out, which we knew nothing about. So while we're trying to develop that brand and we had certain expectations in mind, there was a whole new learning experience that we had ahead of us and that we were trying to tackle, at the same time. So that was for one, a very interesting path that we found a lot more challenging than we had expected. From there, I think it's been, when we opened an all-day concept, and it was a cafe by day and a restaurant and wine bar by night, right? So we had this coffee program. Our space is very small. I mean, if you count our bar seats, we have just over 60 seats in the restaurant. And we were aiming to accomplish a lot, create an all-day space that was for the community in a location that has been very overlooked by hospitality in general.
For sure.
Forever.
I would agree.
I mean, the Balboa Peninsula caters so much to tourists and the weekends, and who I came in as a child looking to find, and not at all what the thousands of residents look for.
100%.
I think that was the most, that was our expectation, was that we're going to open a place that is for the community and for those who are coming by and want to discover something that hasn't yet been done. I think Kami can probably talk a little bit about what that looked like, from when we had envisioned it and into execution.
Yeah. When we, like Dave was talking about, like when I look back at our original deck that we had showed our landlords, I mean, it's day and night compared to what the operations are that we're running actually today. I think, and that's how it is with anything. You think something is going to work, and then you actually, figure out what the people actually want, what actually is working for you. And you kind of have to pivot. Hopefully you did it fast enough to where like the market responds in a positive way. But so, yeah, originally the concept was starting out as more of an all day spot. So literally from opening at 7 a.m. with coffee and pastries and moving into wine and charcuterie boards by 5 p.m. and, a full service restaurant at that point. That point onwards, something that, we kind of saw right away was the reaction from the locals regarding our nighttime service, which was fantastic. I mean, it was something that was probably the best guess, and something that turned out to be true was that there really was a hole in the market in that particular location for something exciting, new, and tailored to really the locals. And that's something that resonated immediately with the community. And we found almost like no challenge of basically having people in there every night from the beginning, which was amazing. Like we felt so honored, so blessed. And when you first open a restaurant, there's something really interesting that happens. And I don't know if this is just me speaking or if this happens to other founders or other restaurateurs, but it's like you almost feel like naked, like kind of vulnerable in that sense, where it's like, I have this idea, I spent all this money, I spent all this time, all this energy, and it's like, are people actually gonna like it? And you feel like under the spotlight, where it's like maybe in other businesses you don't feel that way. You're not in front of your guests all the time. Maybe you're behind a computer or in your office, whatever, but that was like a feeling that I did not expect to come up, but it really did. So the fact that, our dinner service and, our wine bar concept, like really resonated so well. Like we couldn't be happier.
Can we pause there for a second? Can I ask you a question? Yeah. So
yeah.
that is probably a new experience for you. Again, it's something you take for granted when you come up through the industry, is the fact that the feedback loop, it's a really small loop, and like the feedback is instantaneous, which isn't true in almost any other industry. And so I think what you struggle with is a founder, the proverbial you. I'm really just talking about myself. What I struggled with for years was feedback, right? Was signal versus noise. Like what do you take and like move forward with? Like what is great feedback and what is, that corner is pretty empty. You could put a stripper pole over there, and it's, because you don't know. Everybody thinks they have great ideas. And the restaurant industry is one of the few industries where like everybody has an opinion and everybody is certain that they're telling you right. And they share it in real time. And so I would assume that you guys got into this to make a little bit of money, but mainly to make a lot of people happy, And
100%.
so I think the initial reaction is always, that you inspire a lot of joy and a lot of rage. For some reason, that's just the nature of opening a new thing. But then you guys have to sit after the restaurant's closed in a quiet room and decide this feedback is worth listening to and this isn't. Because Lord knows, if you took every suggestion you got over the last 12 to 15 months, it would be a zoo. So early on, how did you guys filter? And like, what is your process for filtering that information today?
I think to start, it was so important, given that our only restaurant experience going into this. Now, mind you, Kami had experience in the food business, being, fourth generation in the food industry. But our only experience in hospitality on the hospitality guest facing side was as customers. And we like to think of ourselves as great customers in a lot of places. So we would travel. One of our shared passions has always been to, to explore hospitality venues, whether it's a bar, cafe, a restaurant, or a hotel, or a resort, wherever we go in the world. And that was all we had brought to the table. So we looked, when we were building our concept out, into finding people that had what we lacked. And immediately, I think one of the most interesting things was that we found that it's a very egocentric business. The people that work in it and the people that enjoy it and consume it are very egocentric people. They're very loud. They have a lot of opinions. And I want to spend a second to talk about our journey finding our chef, because I think this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. And Kami was leading the interviews for our executive chef position. And maybe I'll let you talk about Rodney, because he was the first executive chef we interviewed, and he's with us today. And I think he's made a significant impact in how he's able to respond to to feedback from guests.
100%. I mean, he's the reason why we're here. And this is not just for Rodney. This is an example also for Alan, but yeah, like Dave said, I mean, we didn't have, I don't know how to turn on, a commercial oven. If that,
oh my God, I don't know how to turn on a regular oven. I'm right there with you, for sure. I don't know how to cook. No judgment here. No judgment here.
Yeah, I do, but I don't at the same time. And it's like, we didn't have the experience that many restaurateurs have, where it's like you have come up through the chains of like working at a restaurant and you know how the operation should look like, and you have a trade. We don't have a trade in this business. We're not bartenders, we're not cooks, we're not anything. So we're just diners. The only thing that, like Dave said, we had to offer was our opinion and our insight as far as like what the customer wants, which sometimes I feel like I've been to some amazing restaurants and like some great places, and sometimes, the chef is in there and he's the owner and he spent so much time developing these amazing recipes or experiences through the dining. But it's just not doing well as a business. And I feel like it's because sometimes, you're not thinking enough about your customer and what's actually going to sell and how you're going to tell your customer who you are. So where that branding and that communication aspect comes in is so crucial, which is basically what Dave and I had together. As far as like actually turning on an oven, we had to get a chef. And so when I met Rodney, I don't know. It was our first interview, so Dave was very hesitant to say that this was our guy, but I was 100% like, this is the man.
He was that combination where he's able to listen and internalize the feedback so well while maintaining the integrity and identity of our concept. And that balance, to your earlier point, Josh, I think is something that is one of the biggest challenges, right? What do you listen to when we're sitting down? Rodney knew what to listen to. He knew how to internalize it. He knew how to adjust what needed to be adjusted in a way where Kami and I would be confused. We didn't know what to listen to. I mean, do we listen? I mean, we're getting conflicting feedback. And when you're just opening your doors, I mean, people are so bold. They're abrasive. I mean, they're freaking mean. And
dude, they are, for sure they are.
You know?
Yeah, I do.
Rodney,
people will talk shit directly to your face about the thing that you have spent years working on. It's a category of one.
You know, sure. Like they're like, oh, you should have done this. Well, gee, I didn't think about that. Like,
yeah, thanks for all that. Noted.
Look, I used to say it all the time. I was in Southern food because I'm from Southern Louisiana. And people will walk up and they would say, you know, your gumbo's not as good as my grandmother's gumbo. And I would always say, like, let's get her on the line. You think she can push through 750 covers? Call her. Let's get her over here. Like, let's see what she can do. It's a really interesting experience. And again, being outsiders and being so successful in your own right, I would assume that in and of itself was a shock. Also, I would be curious to know about your team, because I think one of the things that we take for granted outside of the industry is kind of the professionalization of the workforce, which isn't exactly the case in our industry all the time, most of the time, some of the time. Right? It's like, I don't know how many bank tellers are getting sent home on a daily basis from banks because they're too fucking hungover. But I do know that's a thing that happens in restaurants every day. And so I'd be curious to know, because again, like, you've both managed teams before. What was it like managing a restaurant team versus managing a team outside of the industry?
It's one of those things that I don't know how I could have been prepared for. It's just one of those things that you learn on the fly, you know, like
and you hear all the stories in the world of, you have no idea, Dave, what's coming your way. One of our good friends, owns a restaurant also locally, and it's one of our favorite spots. It was our first date. It was our first anniversary. It was birthdays. It was all of it. And he's dear to us. And he said to me, Dave, one day we were having a drink at the end of his day. So it was pretty late in the evening or early in the morning, depending how you look at it. And he said to me, Dave, you have no freaking idea what kind of problems are going to come your way. You get to sit in an office and work with software engineers and graphic designers all day, and clients who are in offices, and this is chaos. You don't know what chaos is until you've had a restaurant. You don't know what you're getting into. And he said, if you're lucky, your restaurant will close and go out of business. If I think what's going to happen, I think you guys are going to break up and never speak to each other again. And we had been dating for about 3 years at the time. He said, Dave, I owe it to you to be honest with you. And the types of people you're going to work with here are going to drive you insane. And that was a reality check. And I had to calm myself down from that one. I was pretty upset with him for being so candid originally. And looking back, I mean, every ounce of his advice and feedback was fairly accurate. I mean, unfortunately, we're still together and our restaurant's still open, but there's been days where we have to question everything, where we have, and work through it in a way where we know we're aiming to defeat the odds here. So the people and personnel, I think from day one was a huge shock to us.
Yeah. I
think our first issue was literally in our first hour of service on our soft opening.
Yeah. Yes. We had a bartender that literally like soft open, first day open, just went through training of like 3 weeks with us, and day one.
For sure.
No.
How could they not? How could they not on day one?
But you know what? Like, this is like the hard thing, the hard things that we all have to go through. But then like looking at the team today, I am so confident in the team that we have. Like, I don't know if it's because we're so small and because we've just had to go through so much together in our first year, but we haven't had a single employee resign, which I feel very, very proud about. And the only people that are not there today is because, they just weren't a fit. And today I feel so confident in the team that we have. And I feel genuinely grateful because, yes, there were bad actors. Like, we all know that this industry is filled with them, but there are some really, really talented and great people to work with at the same time. And we all have bad days. Like, I mean, we all work 40 hours a week in 900 square feet. I don't know if any other industry has those same challenges. I mean,
at least the 40 hours a week. I mean,
for sure, at least.
I think it's around double that for many of us.
Sure. Yes. For us, 40 hours would be nice.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was talking with my general manager at the fine dining restaurant, and he just turned to me, and he was a young manager, very talented, and he ended up staying with us through the duration of the restaurant. And he was like, "I'm exhausted. Like, I put in 55 hours this week, and I'm just beside myself, exhausted." And as the words are coming out of his mouth, my business partner and executive chef is rounding the corner and just says, out of the blue, he goes, 55 hours? I remember my first part-time job, and they just kept walking.
55 hours would sound nice to me, but
yeah, doesn't it? I would ask you though, like, have you taken inventory yet? Like, have you guys looked back? I mean, 12 months was March, roughly, right?
Yep.
March, April.
March.
And so, like, did you guys sit down and have that conversation? Like, if we could do it all over again, this is what we would do differently. This is what we would do the same. And if so, what did that list look like? What would you do differently? And what would you do the same?
So actually, we just had this talk not too long ago, and
I want to hear it.
Between us, like, it's not even like we're normal business partners. Like, we come home and it's like right before we're like headed to bed, brushing our teeth, is like, you know what I'm thinking about, and it's a 2-hour conversation, which is another challenge in and of itself, as if we didn't have enough. But anyways, we had this conversation recently, and kind of going back to my earlier point, when we first started, we thought we were going to be this all-day spot. The nighttime resonated with the community immediately, and the daytime, I think, for a few different reasons, our location, the competition of other daytime cafes, coffee shops, and whatnot. It really struggled, and I think we were a little bit slow in reacting to, like, just being okay with scrapping part of the identity and the concept, and fully diving into what was working and what was, pulling the success that we were having. So I think that's something I would have done differently right off the bat, is, having just being less afraid to make real-time calls, I think, is something that I've learned. Because like Dave said, or like we all know, we're here kind of beating the odds, and every day that we're open is really a fight to stay open and be open tomorrow. So I think, when we gave it our best effort for the daytime, whether it was through marketing and, setting up this great process, and when we were a little slow in deciding to fully pivot to a nighttime and full restaurant, and just like, So that's something I would do differently. Another thing that I would do differently is, for a minute, we thought we could be open and okay without a liquor license, given that we were so wine focused. Mm-hmm. And I think like a few months into being open, we just like, kind of everybody told us, but I thought nobody has a good wine program around us. So I think we'll be okay. And, that is something that kind of foolishly, we didn't have enough experience on, and we didn't listen carefully to maybe some of the advice that we had been given. So that's something I would do differently from day one, is I would never open without a liquor license, which we now have. And the results are so different. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know how we went through our first year without it, but we did. So those are like my two big things: the liquor license, and honestly, just be like you said, it was a combination of too much feedback. You don't know how to filter through it. You are afraid to like make those real-time shots because you're kind of like, should we not, is this going to look weak on the market? Is this going to send the wrong message? What are we going to tell people? We do have a few regulars that love our coffee, and like, what are we going to do with them? And at the same time, it's like, you can't, live in fear, and you really just have to learn how to look at the performance of your business, and you have to make those calls that are necessary for you to, be successful. And so that's like one of the things that I've really just taken to heart and try to keep at the top of my mind is, whether it's a menu item where it's like, okay, it's not selling, get it off. Like, there must be a reason. We need to retry. Or, whether it's something bigger, like, you know what, there's nobody here between 7 a.m. and 12 p.m. So, or there is some, or you have to, the other side is like, you have to kind of like read between the lines and maybe try to figure out like what is missing and what you should be offering instead. And so those are the things that we kind of looking back would say, I don't know, that we would do differently. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that sums it up for me. I think that the liquor license was huge. I mean, so much of the reason we decided to go into this is because we had a belief that what we feel is missing is what everyone feels is missing. And that's not always the case. I think we had to learn that the hard way through seeing elements of our business struggle so much right off the bat. And I think what I will always dreamt of is having the most incredible European selection of wines in Orange County, but limiting a restaurant exclusively to that and excluding guests that are incredible, that share a passion for great hospitality, to only a wine and beer selection might not be the answer. So I think getting over your own dream and opening the doors to new friends and new guests is always a plus.
If I could share a personal aside, what I figured out along the way, like when I was trying to filter through the signal and the noise myself, and what made being a restaurateur far easier, was I just stopped listening to what everyone said and I just started watching everything that people did. And it was like the most useful tool in the world. And then I committed myself to not trying to force anyone to do anything that they didn't want to do. We launched lunch. It was a bag of shit out the gate. Nobody cared. So I closed it, and it was just, now, could we have invested in, like, you guys understand marketing, could we have invested enough money to create broad scale awareness for this thing? And maybe then it would have taken off. Maybe. But generally, if the people that love us most don't like it, then it's probably not even worth it. It's once it wasn't about getting busy on a Monday, it was like doubling down on the weekends, when it wasn't about like building out new services and it was just trying to extract as much money as I possibly could from the services that people already loved, right? Trying to make all my money for the week on the weekends, like everything changed for me. And it was like the biggest thing. On the marketing side, I would ask you, what best practices did you bring from your existing industries into this one? Because Lord knows marketing isn't a strong suit for the industry at large. And I would think, in having worked in and around branding for as long as you did, that, you gave a lot of thought to product market fit as well as like awareness. And so what is your approach there? And how has it helped you with new customer acquisition and customer frequency?
Well, he's the branding expert really, but I can tell you what surprised me is like we never really worked side by side before this restaurant. So what the process that Dave had for us as an exercise before we opened and while we were in construction was in depth. Dave, you did good. Yeah, you
Thank you.
Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, so we started with this concept, right? And then we had to start thinking about what it would look like. And so that the interesting part that Dave brought up was, you want your concept to like be felt throughout the physical space, and then you want your branding elements to be reflected in that physical space as well. So even thinking of like the colors that you're going to have with your branding guide and, the tones that you want to have are reflected throughout the space, like those need to be aligned. And so even when, we were picking out like our patio umbrellas, or even before that, do we want wood flooring? Yes, because I think we want to give out this kind of cozy vibe inside the space. So like you kind of choose your materials based on who you want to be on the market. And we spent so much time just like thinking about who we are, who our customer is, what our story is, how do we relate that, and how do we make it feel, even in the space itself, like all cohesive and all make sense. And so we incorporated our branding elements in the physical space. We incorporated them throughout our storytelling. We incorporated them on our menu offerings, on, which wine we're going to have, which food we're going to serve, what coffee cups we're going to use, what kind of sugar we're going to give out with our coffee. And so this was all something that happened before we even opened our doors. And then obviously, you open your doors and things change and things pivot, but what isn't going to change is who you are. Like, yes, you can maybe shift your hours around, or your menu items might shift here and there, but who you are and what you're trying to do shouldn't change, and it didn't change for us. And that's something that, Dave led. Dave led this process of really dialing in what Casa Dami was, and how do we communicate that so that the story feels, cohesive through everything, through our social media, through our plates, through our cups, through literally just our hostesses when they answer the phone, or our voicemail, like, it's everything. And so we spent so much time doing that. And I think we still look back at those brand guides whenever we're updating our social media channels or whatever. And we don't really deviate from those too much, because I think they're really well thought out. And if we try to stay consistent as best we can to what those brand elements are, and we try to incorporate them throughout the whole experience. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that hit the nail on the head pretty well. I think, Josh, I have a belief that every brand is a story. Every brand should be a story. If they're not, if it's fabricated out of no meaning, it doesn't hold any value. It doesn't resonate. Our logo is a rose, and I think our rose shares what brought Kami and I together. So the name Casa Dami so Casa obviously is house. Dami is Dave and Kami. And this restaurant was something that it was born out of our love for each other, our love for hospitality. And that's our story. That's where our story began. And, we want to create elements, visual touch points, interpersonal touch points that resonate, that help people remember what our story is and what their story can become, whether it's a first date that they experience our restaurant for the first time, or it's a business meeting and there's a sense of connection that they should remember and that they should take home with them. So I think most founders typically ask, how do we open 20 locations? Our question when we opened the restaurant was, how are we going to make one location unforgettable? Because curiosity for expansion and desire for expansion doesn't create a story. But if your story and your brand resonates so well with a community of people, I think that creates a lot of expansion opportunities. So our goal has always been, how do we make this small, intimate venue the best it can be and as memorable as it can be, and work outwards from there.
I think that the minute you get into the industry, it does something to the way you see every other restaurant. It's now when you dine out, right? You're working. You're always working. You're always looking at, oh, that's where they put the bathrooms. That's very interesting. Oh, look at how the service bar is set up. Maybe we could steal that. It changes everything. When I walk through places, when I am dining anywhere, I'm always taking inventory of what I like that they've done better than me and what I think I've done better than every other place I've ever been to. And the way I like to end these conversations is to talk about the things that you do better than everyone else. And so I would ask you, when you look at your competitive set and when you look at the muses that inspired you to do this, and then you look at the place that you built, what did you do better than everyone else? What are the tactics, the tools, the strategies that you've executed that have helped you create a category of one restaurant that we could internalize and we could use to improve our own places?
I'd say it all falls to the people that represent our story and our brand, and the people that enjoy and take that brand with them and return so often. The relationships that have come out of both our staff and our guests are, I think, unparalleled. When I look at what makes us stand out, it's on a day-to-day basis that we see that not only is there such a strong camaraderie between our own team, which has taken just over a year to build, but I think it's going to last a lifetime. But when we on a every day hear that our guests, our regulars, our friends are coming in to the space and they've found, we recently heard a story of someone who met the best man at their wedding at our restaurant. They've met their business partners at our restaurant. They're starting a new venture together, and that we've gotten to be a part of that story. And our staff, our colleagues, our peers have gotten to be a part of that story, I think is what lasts in our hearts and in our minds the most. The community of people and those relationships, I think, are invaluable. You can't put a price on it. That's my answer. I think that's what stands out to me the most, and I think that's the hardest thing to make happen. And, when we go around and look at other restaurants, yes, you're absolutely right. We're looking at what we could have done better, where we think we stand out. But the one thing you can't put a tangible, value on is the relationships that come out of a place. I think that has to be something that's created organically. And yes, there's things we've done right to make that happen. Mm-hmm. But I think that more so, in tech, the big buzzword for like the last decade plus has been culture. But I feel like the culture we've built at the restaurant, and especially given the preconceptions of restaurant culture, are actually not what you'll find at Casa Dami at all. These are people who care for each other. Some of them are now living with each other. Some of them have created romantic relationships with each other, business ventures. I mean, everything I've mentioned, these are things that you can't put a value on. And I think that comes out of people. Yes, we can strive to have the best wine list. Yes, we can have the best marble on our bars and on our tables. But how do you put a value on the people and the relationships that are being built? I don't know if you have something to add to that, but that's where I see the most value.
I would agree. And I think it's really cool actually to hear like our guests feel that. Like they always, not always, but I hear it sometimes where it's like, everybody looks so like friendly when they're working here. It's like, yeah, sometimes too much. Like yes, but it's true. Like, we've really, going back to our team, like it's so tight knit now. And it's really somebody I can really rely on so many of our staff members, and they can rely on each other. And I think like it's created that bond now where it's like, everybody has personalities and everybody has, moments and whatever, but it's really tight knit and everybody's really happy from what I can tell to be there, and the guests can feel that. But also when you hear it from other guests, hi. And sometimes not so. We get this feedback of like, oh, everybody here is so amazing, and I've met such amazing people at this restaurant. Or, that's just like, I don't see that happen too many times when I go out at other places, like you walk in and there's so much mingling happening between all sorts of like sectors, and everybody feels like it's like almost a membership club or like somewhere where like people like know each other and, come here because they know you're gonna be here or whatnot. And so it really does feel like a community, which really warms my heart, because I think that was one of our biggest goals, was to create a space for the community. And I think the community has come out and embraced it, which has been amazing.
And a large part of that, honestly, I think that culture was, so our first two hires were our executive chef, Rodney, who we spoke about, but our wine, beverage, and kind of our front of house manager, his name's Alan. And he created that from day one. I mean, he guided us through the process of creating a place like that. He brought incredible experience to the table, and he's a warm, hospitable person by nature. But those relationships between not only our staff and guests and guests, and staff, are just so deep at this point that I don't think that if another restaurant had a better menu, or the food tastes a little better, or the wine was better, or the cocktails taste a little better, I don't think that would ever break these relationships up. And I think that's where we take the most pride.